DeDe, welcome back. We're still talking about the probate process in California, and specifically Newport Beach and Costa
Yes.
Mesa and Irvine, all these areas in Orange County. Last time we talked about some of the basics, but we want to get a little bit more specific now. Um, are there any local procedures, quirks in that area that can actually impact the probate process?
Yes, absolutely. So I think a big quirk is when people try and go improper, which means that they are doing it themselves. And many times, they will fill out the paperwork wrong. Can you do it yourself? Of course you can, but it's going to be delayed. And when we attend a hearing, usually the matters that have been dragging on are those that are trying to do it themselves. And Orange County is a big proponent of notice, right? You always want to give notice. And sometimes if they're doing it themselves, they just won't realize that they have to give notice to all of the heirs, and they have to give notice to, people that maybe have been disinherited. They still are entitled to notice. And so that is a big delay because the judge will actually say, you got to go and give notice to these people, and I'm going to continue it for 30 days or 45 days depending on where you are in the probate process. And so again, I know it sounds crazy, but it makes it smoother if you do contact an attorney and you have an attorney walking you through the process. And of course, we'd love to serve you if you find yourself in this situation.
What role does real estate play in probate cases, and are there any specific challenges, especially with Orange County being an area with high value property?
There are a lot of challenges, right? And so here in Orange County, a lot of people have bought homes, many, many years ago, whether it's grandparents, parents, and there's two folds. Their property tax is very low, and then also their basis in the real estate is very low. And what I mean by the basis, if they bought a piece of property for $100,000, whether that's grandma or, mom or dad, and they've held on to that property is probably now worth a million or more, right? And so you want to make sure and get the step up in basis when somebody dies. And then also, many times people will say, oh, well, I'm going to transfer the property while I'm alive. And if they transfer the property while they're alive, then the person that there is receiving it will take parents or grandparents' basis. So they actually take that $100,000 basis. So when they go to sell it, if the property is worth $1 million or more, they're going to have capital gains. So it's better to go through the probate process, right? Because you will get that step up in basis. So then the other kind of real estate issue here in California is property taxes, right? So your property taxes, Prop 13 locks in your property taxes when you purchase it. And the property taxes do not get reassessed until it's a change of ownership. And right now, anytime there's a change of ownership, then the property will get reassessed. We do have a little clause where if mom or dad is leaving the property to their son or daughter, and let's say the property is worth $1 million, then and the child is going to move into the property, then what they have is what's called a parent-child exemption. And as long as they're going to live in that property, then property taxes will only be adjusted, but they won't be reassessed, which is, it's a little more complicated issue than that, but that can happen within a trust or even at probate if a child's going to be moving in, but it has to be equally distributed with all the beneficiaries. So hopefully if it's a $1 million house and you have 3 kids, there's $2 million in assets, or else that child has to buy them out. But you want to preserve that property tax, right? So there's ways around it to preserve it. But it's the capital gains because property has just, skyrocketed here in, California, especially Orange County. And then the property tax, you always want to be looking at that as well.
What are some of the common mistakes you see people making early on in the probate process?
Early on, well, not hiring an attorney, that's number 1. But number 2 is not really having an understanding of the process and not understanding, is there going to be a dispute? Can I try and, reach a settlement agreement? Because many times within probate, instead of going through litigation, there's an opportunity to reach a settlement agreement with if there's multiple beneficiaries, and especially with blended families, right? A lot of times one spouse will die and they want to make sure that their spouse, even though it's not the, parent of their children, they want to provide for them. And so a lot of times that creates issues if people haven't thought through that. And so reaching a settlement is always much better than just litigating and going to trial. Another pitfall is sort of, people have a misnomer, oh, if I have a joint tenants with right of survivorship, then at the second death, is anything covered? No, no, right? It may pass outside of the probate process, but once you have that second death, then you're triggered in probate. And so you have to remember here in California, probate is triggered if you have assets of 184,500, right? So 184,500, which you cannot buy a house for that, and I don't even know, like, some mobile homes right now, I don't even know that you can buy those for 184.5. So that's the triggering point of probate, so you wanna avoid that, and that can arise a joint tenants with right of survivorship, at the second death, you're back into probate, right? And then another misnomer would be the, process of going through, right? Maybe there's a reverse mortgage on it and you need to sell that pretty quickly. And so another is people think, "Oh, I'm just going to sell the property and pay back that reverse mortgage and I want to keep it." Well, there's a time frame for doing that, right? And you have to get your letters before you can sell the property to pay back the reverse mortgage. So the real estate plays a significant part in probate in balancing the timeline and the beneficiaries. A lot of it just really has to do, with who the beneficiaries are and if they're disputing, right? And what are they disputing? And I always say it's, bad news is better sooner rather than later, and see what you can do. And again, a settlement agreement, you can do settlements within probate.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times they have to be approved by the court, but it helps with the process.
What recommendations do you have for finding where all these assets are and accessing these assets and accessing accounts? Like maybe
Mhm.
uh, you have mom and dad has passed, and dad was the tech savvy member of the partnership of the marriage. What recommendations do you have for figuring out how to locate all of this stuff?
Goodness. Well, hopefully that's been discussed before somebody passed, right? And they have told the child or the niece or the nephew or whoever's going to be assisting where everything is and how to get access to it. Maybe they have a folder. Obviously, if they have a state plan, they'd have a binder. You need to find that. But if you're absolutely lost, and many times people are, you can hire a private detective to do an asset search and try and see, what kind of assets did this person have and where are they? But you have to do that pretty quickly because there could, things could be turned over to the state of California, unclaimed property. So you really need to have that conversation before. Otherwise, you are going through people's desks, closets, their messy kitchen drawer to try and find statements if you are just absolutely clueless and you don't know what kind of assets these people had. I had many times people come in and they're like, "I know they had a checking account or I know they had a brokerage account. Can't you find it?" I'm like, "Well, how would I be able to find it?" Right? So it's a matter of looking through, or if there's a financial advisor or if they had a confidant, right? Usually people will leave something. There are bank statements, right? Or now everything's starting to be online and digital. You need to have the passcodes in order to get access to these. So you really need to have that conversation before mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle, you know, become incapacitated or not able to share where their assets are because there's no directory